'Tis I, your old pal, King Chuck. Hoping I'm not pressing the wrong buttons here, and it sounds like I'm recording okay. I'm at the old park today, so if you hear my dog barking away at other dogs, my apologies. I'm not gonna edit it out because I'm too lazy for that shit. Anyway, I want to talk about, first things first, let's talk about the media. So a big victory for the media today, this weekend. A judge has ruled that the merger between Nextstar and Tegna was unconstitutional due to antitrust concerns, and I totally agree. Mainly because in several markets, Tegna and Nexstar own more than 2 TV stations. Indianapolis and even here in Grand Rapids come to mind. Already as it is in Indianapolis, the ABC affiliate in town was purchased by the now former CBS affiliate in town, which is now a CW affiliate, Wish TV8. They bought out WRTV Channel 6, and the entire staff was fired as a result. WRTV Channel 6 was formerly owned by Scripps, and Scripps is having some major financial difficulties. There are rumors that Sinclair wants to buy them out. Of course, here in Grand Rapids, Nexstar owns Wood TV8, NBC, and one of the 2 ABCs here in the Grand Rapids region, WOTV 41, Nexstar owns, Tegna owns WZZM 13. The reason why there's 2 ABC affiliates in West Michigan is because WZZM covers Grand Rapids, while 41 covers Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. And under FCC laws, 13 could not cover Kalamazoo due to the fact that there's a Channel 13 in Toledo, Ohio, and there were interference concerns. That in Rockford, Illinois, yes, WREX, which is that market's longtime ABC affiliate, or was the ABC affiliate at the time, now it's NBC. Rockford has had its fair share of affiliation switches over the years. So what happened is there was some speculation, just my opinion, that WZZM 13's news department would be shuttered by Wood TV8, because Wood TV8 dominates the market. 13 is, if it's not dead last in the ratings, it's close to it. And it might explain why Brian Sterling has been covering the nightly newscasts by himself as of late, because Susan Shaw retired recently. So he's been doing the 6 o'clock news by himself. Of course, he's joined at 11 o'clock by Amber Kriska, who's on a pretty effed up schedule herself. You know, traditionally there's a morning newscast, a noon newscast, 6 o'clock newscast, and 11 o'clock newscast. But in the case of Wood TV8, you know, the story was, and I see trouble, by the way. Yeah, the story kind of went like this. Wood TV8, yeah, Susan wanted to only work days only. Anyway. Yeah, he's saying, give me a reason, to his dog. Yeah, my dog's now barking at that dog. Yeah, this is what happens when you take your executive producer to your park, the dog park. So that's kind of good news, but that Nextstar and Tegna, for now, will not be merging. But, you know, I think they're going to fight hell and high water to try to merge. And, you know, of course, in my honest opinion, if Tegna's having major financial difficulties, just, they've been trying to find a new owner for a couple of years. But, of course, mainstream TV has been kind of in a down spot in the last couple of years. And people are like, yeah, let's merge and combine everything. And, I mean, it's not necessarily to the best interest of the viewer who wants, I think a lot of people just want a newscast that's not kowtowing to Trump, and that's what Trump wants. He wants the news to bow to him. And, this morning I was watching CBS this morning, Sunday morning, as I do every Sunday morning. And, even though, yes, Barry Weiss has ruined CBS and all that, and they did a news story this morning on CBS Sunday Morning about these truck drivers who drive erratically, and there's been like 5,000 major truck accidents this year, and they talk about some of the people who have been killed, and this young girl named Delilah who is 5 years old, and now she's got the mentality of an 18-month-old because she was in a serious truck accident. And they cry that a lot of these truck drivers are foreigners. The one guy was from Cuba, another guy was from India, and they're basically saying that these people are bad drivers. And I understand. It's, I think the simple solution in all this is, create laws that would make the truck driving industry a lot better. And I know they're doing all their best, but it's like, you got to pay your workers a livable wage too, and not make them work. It's like, I agree that, if a truck driver is driving for 8 straight hours, they need a break, and it's like, this report basically says that these, the real problem is, well, these people are from other countries and they're terrible drivers and they are illegal. And I mean, this is what happens, folks, when you got a media that's basically sucking the dick of the most Hitler-friendly president of all time. And people like me and you end up losing, because that's how the media runs. So, that's what CBS is doing. They're becoming state regime media, just like Fox. They're Fox News Light now. And unfortunately, the biggest losers end up becoming people like me and you who want good journalism. And, for me, it's Meidastouch. And the reason why I love Meidastouch is because these people are from my generation. Ben Meiselas is a young guy. He's a little younger than I am, but he's got a lot more money than I do. He made his money as a lawyer. And, of course, he's the owner of Los Angeles Magazine, one of the owners, I should say. But, he gave up his job as a lawyer to become the host of this podcast with his 2 younger brothers, and they both work with him. And, this is why I listen to them and not, it's like, if I watch NBC News, which is my primary news source, because I grew up with NBC. I grew up with Tom Brokaw, and I liked Brian Williams until he fucked up and decided that he needed to tell a lie about his military experience. Yeah, let's not forget about that. But, I think Tom Yamas is doing an okay job. Lester Holt did okay too. But overall, you got to remember who owns these networks. And, Comcast owns NBC, and they're helping to build that new wing of the White House, the ballroom. And now CBS is owned by the Ellisons. They've kowtowed to Trump by canning Stephen Colbert. Next month will be his final day, and soon it's going to be Byron Allen TV, unfortunately. And Byron Allen is he's to me a Democrat in name only. He calls himself a Democrat, and yet he goes around, buys up TV stations, and fires everybody. And then he realizes he's broke as a joke, can't pay the networks, so he ends up firing more people, and then selling his TV stations to boot. It's like, anyway. So, moving forward, also in the world of broadcasting, over the weekend we got some sad news that Bob Kevoian has passed away. Bob Kevoian, 75 years old, died from a 3-year battle of cancer. He was half of Bob and Tom. And, for years and years, I attacked Bob and Tom for being just unfunny Howard Stern wannabes. And, they did a lot of double entendre stuff that was actually pretty funny. And I think one of their best bits was a comedy bit called Dickens Cider. And when I heard the bit for the first time, I had to replay it several times because it was just too funny. Because they said, if you were, I haven't listened to it in years, but they said, if you really want a good cider, then you want a big Dickens cider. Or you can mix it with 7-Up and have a 7-Up and cider. Yeah. But here's the thing. Bob and Tom started in my hometown radio market, northern Michigan. Started in 1983 at WJML Radio. 99 FM, which is now a Christian station, and 1110 AM, which is also now a Christian station. But WJML, back in the late 70s, they killed it in the ratings. And then what happened was 106 KHQ signed on in 1980. Both stations were spinning top 40. And the guy who owned KHQ was really combative against JML. So this is what he did. He learned there was a radio station in Indianapolis called Q95, and they were in dire need of a new morning show. So he sent an air check of Bob and Tom's morning show at JML to Q95, WFBQ, and they were hired on the spot. And shortly after Bob and Tom left JML ended up flipping to an adult contemporary format. And there was even a DJ at WJML who joked that because the station was sounding so bland now, that he actually called the station the Muzak station as opposed to being the music station, 99 JML. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, JML was bought out by the folks who own KLT. 98.9 became a long-time simulcast of KLT, and the AM was spun off, and it became a news talk station for many years. I think I told you the story about how their demise happened. Yeah, they made a huge mistake because for many years they had 11:10 a.m. and then the guy who owned it, his name was Rick Stone, started another AM station in Petoskey at 750. And at first it was an oldie station, but then he decided, since so many people hated George W. Bush and, it was Michael Moore country, why not start a progressive talk station with Air America? And that's what he did for several years. 1110 was conservative and libertarian. Well, 750 was the liberal station. And what happened was Rick made a giant mistake. He switched 750 for 12:10 a.m. in Traverse City. And 12:10, of course, was owned by Roy Henderson. And Roy, of course, as I mentioned multiple times, piece of shit asshole. He flipped 750 to country, to simulcast Sunny Country 1019 in Traverse City. And it's like, come on, new country on an AM station? Are you fucking kidding me? Meanwhile, most of the liberal shows stayed on 1110 and now 1210, which simulcast each other. But one by one, all the liberal shows were being canceled. And Ed Schultz was down to 1 hour a night. And guess who replaced him? Good old Alex Jones. Oh my God. Alex Jones, biggest fucking liar in the history of mankind. And even he, I mean, yes, this is the guy who lost $1 billion lawsuit against the families of the victims of Sandy Hook, because on his show, he said, oh, the Sandy Hook kids were all crisis actors because I saw their names on imdb.com. Bullshit. Well, anyway, he lost his empire. InfoWars ended up having to go out of business, and now he's doing a new podcast elsewhere, I guess. And even he has... He woke up and realized how bad Trump is. So, anyway, back to Bob and Tom. So when Bob and Tom were on the air in Indianapolis, their numbers were phenomenal. They were the darlings of the media down there. And then what happened was Howard Stern's show started to be syndicated, and some radio station, Howard Stern in the 30 years ago was on a tear. His books were bestsellers. Private Parts and Miss America were bestsellers. The E! Show had monster ratings. The Private Parts movie was a hit at the box office. He was truly the king of all media. But there was and of course the radio show had monster numbers. Every market it was in, almost every market. But there was a problem. The problem was his syndicator wanted big time dollars. And, they didn't format the show to have blackouts for commercial breaks and all that. You actually had to have a board operator that covered up every reference to K-Rock and K-Rock commercials and yada, yada, yada. So what happened was all these other networks and broadcasters were like, they realized, back in the 50s, there was Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine was immensely popular. And all these people saw Mad's success and said, why don't we do our shit? And so some of these magazines were formed, like even Hugh Hefner had a Mad clone called Trump, ironically. He actually hired away Mad's creator. His name was Harvey Kurtzman. And then, all these Mad clones hired away a lot of their artists. Of course, Cracked was the biggest of the Mad clones. And, they even hired away John Severin, who was one of the first artists over at Mad. And, of course, Cracked for a while even had Jack Davis, who was a long-time Mad Magazine stalwart. Of course, he ended up going back to Mad. And even Al Jaffe, worked for Cracked for a while. Oh, there's a woman with 2 giant huskies. Oh, man. So that's exactly what these syndicators did. They, Man Cow was one. Bob and Tom was another. Bob and Tom was probably, they had more affiliates than Howard did. But they were all in small markets. And the show was very cheap to carry, as opposed to Howard. Some stations were paying upwards to $1 million a year, especially in the bigger markets. Smaller markets got to pay a little bit less, but they were still, some people did say, well, the money just was, it just wasn't affordable. And not only that, a lot of markets had to deal with, the religious right. And, some advertisers were, big Jesus freaks, and they wouldn't pay a dime to put, carry Howard's show, because in their minds, they thought Howard was the Antichrist. But when it came to Bob and Tom, they were nobody, so they were like, okay, we can deal with Bob and Tom. But Bob and Tom did do some raunchier bits in Howard, believe it or not. And even, people like Rush Limbaugh said stuff that would, Rush Limbaugh was never fined by the FCC. He never was, as far as I know. And I caught him doing stuff that was, raunchier than Howard. But, the religion, I'll tell you more in a minute about why how effed up the religious right are. So the story was, Bob Kevoian, Bob and Tom, so what happened was, a couple of years later, in 2003, when the Janet Jackson nip slip happened during the Super Bowl halftime show, Bob and Tom, they were owned by Clear Channel, and they were syndicated by the premier radio networks. Bob and Tom made a deal saying, we're going to make our show PG rated. We're going to retire some of our inappropriate bits because we don't want to get fired. We don't want, and basically that was career suicide to me, because then Howard Stern, this is what Howard did. He basically said, fuck you to the system. I'm going to Sirius XM. And he took 30 million listeners away from terrestrial radio. And that's what happened. Howard took a lot of listeners away from boring traditional radio. And because he challenged the system. And Bob and Tom, on the other hand, well, this is what happened. They stayed on terrestrial radio up in northern Michigan, where they were carried on the Bear. So the story was, the reason why they ended up on the Bear in the first place was because it used to be WGFM. Yeah, and the morning guy was Del Reynolds. He was also the station's owner. Del sold the stations, and he told the new owners, put Bob and Tom on. Everyone will remember them, because they came from northern Michigan. And Bob and Tom and the new station, the new rebranding, the Bear, it kicked ass in the ratings. And KLT, boring KLT, was stuck in the past. I even suggested to KLT, carry Howard Stern. But here's the problem. The Goki family, they own KLT. They were the type of people that, treated their DJs like chattel. They didn't want to pay any of their DJs a livable wage. And that's why they kept getting fired. Or they all quit. Of course, one of the sole survivors, of course, was Terry Ray. I mean, I always wondered how the hell she tolerated that station for decades, or how they treated her. But KLT's problem was that they never really had a good morning show until Omelette and Finster came in, and they ripped off a lot of Howard's bits. Like, they'd have their own whack pack. And, of course, they made headlines because one of their, they call it the Misfits, and one of their Misfits was Madonna's brother, who was homeless. And, of course, when the Super Bowl was in Indianapolis, and when Madonna herself was the Super Bowl halftime show performer, they were like, yeah, you're going to be doing stupid stunts because we're attention whores at KLT. And that's what happened. And then, they even did the intern show for a podcast. And I'm like, Howard Stern's already doing this shit. Why are you ripping him off? Jesus Christ. So anyway, long story short, when I took on KLT because of that, one of their Misfit members wrote a couple of nasty grams to me and said, we really want you to come up north so we can ream you a new asshole. And I'm like, fuck you. Why would I want to come to your little butt rock station? Oh my God. This is why I started Chuck 69, folks. It was to tell Northern Michigan Radio, you guys suck ass. And if you think your shit is so good, then how come in the last several years you actually had to sell your stations to Jesus groups? Seriously. The Fox FM is now, 94.3 is now CMU Radio. And 92.5 went to Jesus. 105.5 is now a Jesus station. And that used to be an ESPN station. 98.9 is a Jesus station. That used to be part of the, JML and then later on KLT. That's the thing, folks. Northern Michigan Radio is not as profitable as it once was because they don't have a quality product. They've allowed the wrong people to run the business. And hell, back to Bob and Tom for a minute. Even the Bear got rid of Bob and Tom because the Bear, here's the thing about the Bear. They made one mistake after another. They kept Bob and Tom after they decided to go, namby-pamby G-rated. And then on top of that, they decided, they hired a dumbass named Ted Kramer. And Kramer decided that Ted Nugent would go great with Depeche Mode. And I'm like, are you fucking in a flock of seagulls even? Dude. And the ratings went downhill. And Ted was fired. Not only that, but it turns out Ted Kramer didn't even like me. Yeah, Ted Kramer, by the way, is the asshole who posts on the Michigan Radio and TV Buzzboard as Zand. He now works at WIFE in some shithole town outside of Indianapolis, which is a shitty country station, by the way. Yeah, he was a ass licker to Bush, but thankfully he hates Trump, especially since his family has had a multitude of health problems over the years, and I guess his son had COVID, and really bad COVID, and now he's walking with a walker. Ted is. Anyway. But the point is, folks, is that back to Bob and Tom. So Bob retired from the show a couple of years ago. And so and they keep calling the show Bob and Tom because Bob is still an emeritus member of the show. And it's all because of marketing reasons. That it's like Steely Dan. Walter Becker died. And Donald Fagen felt that Steely Dan was him and Walter. But his manager basically said, well, dude, if you go touring as simply Donald Fagen, it's a bad career move. So tour as Steely Dan because people love Steely Dan. Well, that's kind of how it went. So that's why they keep calling the show Bob and Tom, So anyway, it's Tom and a bunch of new guys now. And, the show is back on the Bear. The Bear took him off the air for a few years. And then they tried out a bunch of new morning shows. They even brought in Omelette after he got fired from KLT. Of course, Omelette is back on KLT, and the show is, KLT's #1, the ratings across the board. But Bob and Tom, their ratings are a far cry from what they used to be. And I know Black Diamond, the new owners of the Bear, they're trying real hard to get the station's ratings back up, and good luck with that. Yeah, I look at their sister station, Rock 105 and 955, and what a joke that station has become. I mean, even KLT had the balls to start a metal show. And it's like, instead of a metal show, Rock 105 and 955 has like an emo rock show on Saturday nights. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Jesus Christ. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that station's soul disappeared when Smitty quit again for the umpteenth trailing time, because, he gets paid more as a, slapping down beverages at a casino than he does as a DJ. Anyway, yeah, it's like Rock 105 and 955. They call themselves the real rock station, and they're not. It's like I look at their playlist and they're playing stuff like Cake. Okay, I got news for you about Cake. Their lead singer is an asshole. And the reason why I say this is because back in 2016, he attacked anybody who did not vote for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. And I'm like, okay, do your homework, man. It's the Democrats' fault that Donald Trump got into the White House twice. Okay? And they got to have some really strong candidates instead of people who, just say, oh, Oprah loves me, Taylor Swift loves me. Yeah, that's not enough, because let's face it, what about me? What about me who wakes up every fucking morning at 3:30, goes to work? A lot of times I work 10 hours, and, I would love to make it in life, okay? Anyway, but back to Bob and Tom. So Bob was battling cancer for a couple of years. Tom shared some of the last photos he took of him and Bob together. And he was very thin. It's like he had no muscle mass at all in his arms. He had the arms of a little boy, and it was hard to look at, quite frankly. And as much as I didn't care for Bob and Tom for the most part, I as somebody who's lost family to cancer, I mean, my aunt, my grandfather, various members of my family over the years, for most people, I don't wish cancer on them. And I know that Bob Kevoian made it to 75, and he had a good life. Don't get me wrong. And I know Bob and Tom, they've lost a lot of affiliates here in Michigan. I think the only major station that carries the show still here in Michigan is Q106 in Lansing. And I'm trying to think of other stations here in our state that still carry the show. The Bear, of course. Yeah, they started carrying the Bear. The Bear started carrying them again a few years ago after being off the air for a few years. I think it's because they just missed the show. I don't know. Yeah, they're off ideas. But all I can say is my thoughts are definitely with Bob's family and everybody who he's worked with, and he'll be missed. so may he rest easy. I've been blabbing about the media now for, let's check my timer here. Where am I? 35 minutes. Wow. We gotta cut to the chase here, folks. So, one of the things I talk about is active rock, and I'm a big hard rock, heavy metal guy. I love, listening to that stuff. I actually have quite weird musical taste. I also like to listen to like 80s new wave, and I've been on an Italo disco kick as of late as well. Because some of the songs are so bad they're good. But anyway, so one guy I grew up listening to is one of my favorite bands is Disturbed. I gotta put the smack down on David Draiman, though, their lead singer. I did see Disturbed a few years ago in concert, and they do put on a show. And David made himself into a royal asshole this week, though. He was on a podcast hosted by Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins. And he actually said, he basically went on a tear against Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. Roger is an outspoken critic of, so the story is he's an outspoken critic of Israel. David, on the other hand, supports Israel because I guess his family is of Israeli heritage. So David attacked him for, putting, doing stuff on stage that offended, people from Israel, like putting on a big inflatable pig with the Israeli flag on there. And so this is the story. Roger attacked David and said, "Look, man, you support a regime whose ideals are close to Hitler's." And people pointed out that David, a couple of years ago, made headlines because he was caught signing missiles for Israel to attack Gaza. This is why, folks, last year when Disturbed took the stage at the Ozzy tribute concert in England, they got severely booed. And they've had to cancel some shows due to the fact that people don't like them anymore. Because now we've proved to now America is on Israel's side. We've taken the wrong side of history, and we're paying the price for it with high gas prices, children being murdered and slaughtered to death, in Iran. And I'm like, something, man? This is why I get so angry when I find out that when my favorite rock stars make bad political decisions. And I know David Draiman is a millionaire rock star. He makes millions by touring with his band, but don't get me wrong, he's a great and brilliant musician. He's an awesome singer who sports good taste on stage. But the tragic truth is, to support a regime that murders people because of their political ideas, and now we, the taxpayer, are paying trillions of dollars on another war over oil, while Donald Trump is telling Total Energy, a company based out of France, not to build wind turbines here in America because he's not a fan of, because that's right, he's not a fan of renewable energy. Most countries around the world do support it because it helps people instead of drilling into the ground and causing terrible and disgusting things around this world. Look at what's going on here in Michigan. We've had a lot of flooding this week. You know, there's a creek by where my mom lives. She lives a couple of miles from here in Grand Rapids, and the creek at her apartment complex has risen so much. It's like, oh shit. You can tell, I've seen it this big before, and there was massive flooding everywhere. Traverse City, where I'm from. So the story is, my dad's cousin called this week, and, you know, he's trying to put his mom into a home, you know, and she's like 96 years old. And they actually had to drive all around Traverse City just to get there. All because the town's flooded. There's flooding everywhere. There's a massive flood over at Logan's Landing, which is off South Airport Road, which is a major artery through Traverse City. Logan's Landing, by the way, is kind of a shopping complex of sorts. And this week it was just announced that Shorts Brewery was going to put a new pub in there, which is nice. I think that will really help that place. You know, it's been up, it's seen its ups and downs over the years. The Sheboygan Dam is in danger of overflowing. Same with the dam in Bel Air, Muskegon. And, you know, it's because we've had so much rain in the last week. And then last year, we had the major ice storms that were so powerful, it knocked down thousands upon thousands of trees and several radio towers. 106 KHQ lost its tower. Light 96's tower collapsed. Both 100,000 watt stations. They had massive towers. And, you know, now they're having to rebuild them. And it takes a long time to rebuild a radio or television transmission tower. Folks, global warming is real. And I'm sick and tired, and global climate change is real. Our Earth is sick, and Trump is making us sicker by telling everyone we got to drill for more oil. And, you know, not only that, he's using it as an excuse to hide the fact that we have the Epstein, there hasn't been much news regarding the Epstein files in the last several weeks, except for when, you know, his mail order wife bitched and moaned that, I don't know Epstein. Well, okay, explain the email exchanges between you and what's that? Ghislaine Maxwell. There we go. Okay, you were friends. You knew about it. Jesus Christ. You know, and I laugh knowing that too many of his hardcore followers are all standing up and saying they didn't vote for this. Well, you did. You voted to not have the Epstein files released. You voted for tariffs. You voted for higher gas prices, because anybody with an R after their name, unfortunately, is all about how much money they can raise for their their wealthy friends, and how much money they can make for themselves. You know, Donald Trump has made a lot of money since he became president again. He's not working for the American people. He's not helping us. And too many people have lost their jobs because of him. And, you know, and too many people haven't had raises in years, ever since he became president. And what's pitiful about all this, and what is beyond pitiful, is that, is that now we got companies who have lost. I mean, look at what happened recently in California. Excuse me for a second. Good morning.
How you doing?
All right. Yeah, had a couple of passers-by. So look at what's happened. Look at what happened a few weeks ago in California. We had a guy burning down his factory, his warehouse. You know, it was a Kimberly-Clark warehouse. And while doing so, he said, "This is what you get for not allowing us to live a livable wage." And, you know, $1 million warehouse, 1 million square foot warehouse was destroyed. And, you know, of course, a lot of people now have no jobs. But then again, this guy was probably only making $18 an hour working at this factory. And while doing so, and he was living in a town where the rent was about $2,000 a month for just a 1-bedroom apartment. But you see, folks, this is not how we should live here in America. I mean, you got to do the math sometimes. It's like, this is why my mother, you know, she lived in Arizona. She got priced out of her apartment. And now, excuse me, she had to move here because she couldn't afford to live up there. Goal to live in a bigger city. Sometimes it's a lot cheaper to live than Phoenix. You see, folks, what really bothers me is you got to remember who voted for Trump. Trump was trying to be the voice of the evangelical. I finally remember on the night he was elected president, there was a lot of people who were evangelicals, and they were saying that God is now back in the White House, and listening to these people. And, you know, Donald Trump, the only real Christian thing that he did during his first term was he was holding a Bible upside down in front of a Catholic church for a publicity stunt, while his people were gas bombing priests who actually worked there. And, yeah, the person I was thinking about was Paula White, by the way. Paula White, televangelist. She's married to the keyboardist of Journey, which is a band that I absolutely hate with a passion, by the way. Yeah, I don't want to hear, I sing Don't Stop Believing at karaoke. Fuck you. You know? He actually performed that song in front of Jim Baker, who was one of the biggest scumbags of all time. This is a man, Jim embezzled millions of dollars from his followers through his PTL club, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. Tammy Faye had more mascara than, she was a fucking French whore, basically. But anyway, word has it that the members of Journey don't even get along. Gee, I wonder why. Oh, man. But, you see, we all know the story. Last week, Pope Leo, wrote a homily that attacked the war in Iran. And he said that God hates war, and guess what happened? Donald Trump got mad at him, and people were saying, well, you better, I don't think you've ever read the Bible before, and wah wah wah, blah blah blah. It's like, what the fuck are you thinking, man? So what does Donald do? He releases a photo of an AI-generated image of him dressed as Jesus healing a sick man. And then what happens is, then he gets he got the smackdown put down on by Catholic groups and religious groups. This is unacceptable. This is not how, this is blasphemous. Even Meidastouch had the sanctity of saying this man has pretty much breaking every single commandment in the Bible, and I totally agree. And so this is what happens. He ends up, so get this, Franklin Graham, of all people, writes a letter saying that he actually approved of what Donald did. And the reason why is because, well, there was no cross, there was no halo. He was a doctor in this photograph. He is a healer. What? What the fuck, man? And, folks, Franklin Graham doesn't know how it feels to be poor. Franklin Graham's dad was Billy Graham. He led these giant crusades across the country for decades. He filled giant 100,000 seat stadiums for decades with his crusades. And, he even attracted, many A-list celebrities. I remember Johnny Cash was one of those people. And the story was, now Franklin has pretty much taken what his dad did. And, I think he's made it even worse by saying that he supports Donald Trump and that we need to have an evangelical president. When in fact, he's proved to the world that he is not a true, he doesn't even go to church on Sunday. And Biden was looked at as the Antichrist, when in fact, his real problem, when in fact, he actually went to church on Sunday. He is a very devout Catholic. He listened, this was why Biden was one of the best presidents in my lifetime. And what does Trump do? He gets a douchebag like Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of War, as he likes to call it. because that's who he is. He got us into this fucked up war over oil and religion, because it's all about making America evangelical again, making it so everybody has to go to church on Sunday and worship the God of the right-wing conservative, which is pretty much every other church in America now. And what does Pete Hegseth do? He makes a prayer in front of a group of military people from the fake verse from the Bible from Pulp Fiction. It's like, come on, man. It's like, yeah, let's do a prayer from chapter 3 from the book of Austin. The two almighty men stood at each side of the squared circle. One side of the ring was Brother Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and on the other side of the ring, Stone Cold Steve Austin. The referee, dressed in black and white stripes, looked on as brothers Helmsley and Austin began to battle. The two men, the bell rang, their theme song stopped playing, and the two men began to have at it at each other. They started pushing and shoving each other until Brother Helmsley put Brother Austin into a chin lock. Helmsley was bent over Austin as Austin started to choke and turn green in the middle of the ring. The referee stood, waiting for Brother Austin to tap out. Well, but then, mustering enough strength to move on, Brother Austin stood up and started putting the smackdown onto Brother Helmsley until he released the Stone Cold Stunner. He took Helmsley's upper torso and smacked it down into the middle of the ring as everybody in the 15,000 seat arena applauded and yelled and hooted and hollered and held signs, cheered in joyous jubilation as the bell rang after the referee slapped down his hand 3 times. Stone Cold Steve Austin won that match, and he looked down at Brother Helmsley. And this is Austin 3:16. Brother Austin told Brother Helmsley, "I just whipped your ass." And all of God's people said, Amen. You know, what I just said probably makes as much biblical sense as what Pete Hegseth said. Maybe even more sense. Because, come on, it was from a frickin' movie. And don't get me wrong, I love Tarantino. I love Samuel L. Jackson. But for fuck's sake, calling a fake Bible verse as true gospel, and then what's sad is that the religious right, they applaud it. It's like, what the fuck, man? This is why. This is one of the big reasons why I don't go to church on Sunday. And I have not been inside of a church in, I think, 4 years. And the last time I went to church, it was for my uncle's funeral. That's the only time I want to go to church now. I told you the nightmares of me going to church. I've dealt with, the lying, the stealing, the begging of money from me. It's too much. And I just don't like it. Churches are some of the most blasphemous places drama-filled places on earth. And I just don't like it. And it's like, why do I want to spend Sunday morning with 1,000 Trump supporters? There's a lot of people, folks. I've met nicer atheists than I've met Christians. I mean, there's only one atheist I've met in my life who turned out to be a total asshole. And going back to the buzzboard, it was him. The guy who posts as TC Talks. Yeah, he screwed me over big time years ago. Yeah, TC Talks' real name, by the way, is Peter Starkle, who's on the air at WNMC as Peter Strong. Yeah, if I had to choose between WNMC and 99.7 Village Radio LL Rapids, I put my money into Village Radio big time, because they definitely need more support than WNMC does. And they have just about the same programming anyway. So, but folks, the way I look at it is, this is our President of the United States. This is MAGA. This is how MAGA operates. They say that something that isn't gospel is. And they actually attack a true Christian like Pope Leo, who is against war because God hates war. And here's the funny thing. Here's another thing that I applaud. I have a friend, a Facebook friend. I've only met her a few times. Some of you here in Grand Rapids may remember her, Christy Cantel. Christy Cantel was a former DJ at WKLQ in Grand Rapids. She now owns a gym in Alpena. She and her husband moved to Alpena 10 years ago. And she and her husband at first ran the family embroidery business, and then they sold it, and now she runs a gym, and now she works part-time as a newspaper columnist for the local paper up in Alpena. She posted a Bible verse on Facebook the other day, and it was from the book of Psalm. Let me see if I can't find it. My apologies. But yeah, it was the verse in the Bible where it basically says that something about he who is wicked needs to be replaced right away. Who is that person? Yes. Is the guy orange? Does the guy have weird sores on his arm saying that it's from shaking hands, when in fact it's probably from IV medications taken for either Alzheimer's or dementia? Yeah, I would have to say that. But here's the one thing that really, really pisses me off. And we really need to talk about this. I know I've been talking for a minute, 4 seconds now. Hour and 4 minutes, excuse me. Man, I'm full of shit, am I? Well, maybe not shit, but ideas. So the story is that here in Michigan, we're getting a lot of campaign ads on TV. I've seen a lot of ads for Mike Duggan. I've seen Eric Nesbitt's putting on ads now, a lot of them. And even, this past week I started seeing ads for John James. And John James, of course, is talking about his military record and of course, Perry Johnson. And Perry wants to audit the state budget and go after Jocelyn Benson. Benson, of course, is running for governor here in Michigan. So, anyway, the rest of the story is that the story is all three of these men. So, not all three of the men are Republicans. Duggan is running as an independent, even though he used to be a Democrat and was the former mayor of Detroit. He was actually Detroit's first white mayor since early 1970s. And people love the guy because he was credited for rebuilding Detroit and making the town more diverse again, because once upon a time Detroit was what had been a haven for African Americans. And but yeah, what happened was I think that's exactly what happened after the 67 riots. All the white people moved to the suburbs or even northern Michigan like my parents did. And I didn't have a great time living up north because I was the different kid, if you know what I mean. I told you multiple times. And that's the thing about northern Michigan. If you're not one of them, then you don't deserve anything. And meanwhile, all my family, they were in the Detroit area. They got to go to concerts, they got to go to movies, they got to live the best childhood of their lives. And meanwhile, I was stuck up north, and I got, I've told you the story. All the radio stations sucked. Nobody wanted to play my music. It was all about having 10 stations at the same time playing country music, which I absolutely hate with a passion. I mean, I've always looked at country music as the song of the moron, the song of those with only 5 teeth. Yeah, sadly, there's a lot of meth heads up in northern Michigan, and child molesters, and absolute white trash, and people with very low IQs. I mean, it's not the haven that you think it is, folks. And and getting back to politics here, and Duggan. I mean, a lot of people did like Duggan, but now Duggan has a problem. He's running as an independent. He's decided to go away from the Democratic Party and run as an independent. So he's not running against, a crowded group of people. But guess who's funding his campaign? The Republicans. And the reason why they're funding him is due to the fact that so here's the story. The reason why is because they want division among the people on the left. That's what they're doing. And yet, I've yet to see an ad for Jocelyn Benson, who is currently the front runner for the Democrats. That's what it is, folks. It's all about how much money can we make. How much money, because let's face it, Michigan has always been a purple state. Michigan has always been a purple state. In my lifetime, we've had 3 Democratic governors, and we've had 3 Republican governors. And the current governor of the great state of Michigan, of course, is is Gretchen Whitmer. But she's being term limited. Gretchen, and of course, her lieutenant, Garland Gilchrist, Garland is not running for governor. Yeah, he's actually running for Jocelyn Benson's old seat on Secretary of State. Sorry, I had to put my dog up in the car. So what's going on with Garland Gilchrist is he knows he had no chance in hell of being the governor because he's a black dude. And he probably wouldn't get votes from Traverse City or Alpena or any place that's beat red. I mean, he might get votes out of Detroit because that's the problem with Michigan. It's a purple state. So, we're kind of on the moderate side of things. But here's the thing. They think that if we can create a divide among people on the left, then what will happen is the Republicans will win the gubernatorial race of Michigan. And on the right, like I said, it's crowded. You got Eric Nesbitt, you got John James, you got Perry Johnson, maybe a few other folks who who haven't put up an ad yet. And these people are getting, and the Republicans are in desperate need of winning Michigan. They want to win Michigan bad. And look at what's going on in other states. They want, another state, look at what's happened in red states. They've gotten rid of abortion. That's right. If you are in dire need of an abortion, you can't get one now. And, of course, for us men, who love beautiful naked women, guess what? Internet porn in some states, you got to put up your ID online. So basically, that way, the state knows, you're into porn. You're into smut. Shame on you. It's a scarlet letter law, folks. And, thankfully people have gotten around it through VPNs, but unfortunately, some of the people who put up these sites have already said they're starting to lose a lot of money because they make money from pop-ups and the VPNs block the pop-ups. The point is, folks, is that Donald Trump, this is what happens when you elect Republicans. They're going out there crying that they're against porn, and yet the real problem is they do worse stuff than pornography. And, of course, here in Grand Rapids, here in West Michigan, Hillary Scholten, for Congress, she's going up against Terry DeBoer, who is, of course, the former TV weather girl at Wood TV 8. Terry DeBoer, now here's the problem. In a lot of cases, when the Republican running is famous, like Terry DeBoer is, guess what happens? They will go, so this is what happens, folks. They will win. And already, Terry DeBoer has gotten a lot of funding from everybody from the DeVos family to some of her former co-workers, Leon Hendricks, who worked with her at Channel 8. But here's what really pisses me off. One of the big donors of her campaign so far is Matt Berger. Don't know who he is? Matt Berger is the owner of Berger Chevrolet here in Grand Rapids. I have a horror story about Berger Chevrolet. Oh boy. And the car dealerships on 28th Street. 2010, I get into a car accident. I was driving, and believe it or not, I actually bought that car from Berger. And it was a good solid car, but tragically, it only had 90,000 miles in it, but I got into an accident with it. So unfortunately, I was now in the hunt for a new car. And it needed to be a kind of a cheap vehicle too. So I figured, if I could buy a car that's relatively new, low mileage, I wouldn't have to pay a lot for it. So I ended up buying a Chevy Malibu from it was a 5-year-old car. It was an 05 Chevy Malibu from Courtesy Dodge. So the story was, I took the car on a trip, and I noticed that the gas mile, it was sucking too much gas. I checked the gas mileage. It was only getting 26 miles a gallon. It was supposed to get 33. So I took the car. So anyway, they sold me a warranty at Courtesy Dodge. I took it home. So what happened was I checked the warranty, and so this is what happened. I took it into Berger Chevrolet, thinking they would honor it there, and they said, "Yep, I need this, this, and this, and this." Now they honored the warranty on some of the parts, but not for others. I still had to pay $700, and it turned out that there was oil leaking into the air intake. So anyway, that was one of the big problems. $700 later. And then after work one night, I tried to turn the car on. It did not start. So what happened was I turned the car on. So what happened was I was there, I called the tow truck and I said, okay, take it into Courtesy, take me home. It was like 2 a.m. So what happened was I came home, and they called me up and said, well, the problem is the pass lock system is fucked up. Take it into Chevy on the Hill. That's their version, say words, that's what they call Berger, and say, get a new key. But Berger wanted a whole new system. So for some time, I had to deal with waiting 10 minutes for the car to start too many times. And then sometimes I was late for an appointment because of that, and I was pissed off, and it was a nightmare. Anyway, but then one night after work, I started the car, battery was dead. Took it home, so I had to get it jumped. Took it home, battery was still dead, and something was killing the battery. So I took the day off next day, took it into Berger, not Berger, but I took it into Berger because, Courtesy wouldn't do jack shit. Basically, Courtesy was telling me, yep, take it to Chevy on the Hill. That was what they always said. So this is what happened. It turned out that one of the past dealerships that sold the vehicle put in a device called a passkey system that would suck the battery out. That would suck up, that would turn off the vehicle if you weren't making any payments. And I was making the payments on it. So I was mad. So once again, so anyway, they took it out. I had to pay $500 right then and there. So I called up Courtesy Dodge, and I complained. And they said, "Oh, just take it in, we'll take it out." And I told Berger, and I told them, well, we can't do anything because it's all torn apart. So this is what happened. After paying another $500, and now I had 3 credit card bills a month because of this, because I was being nickeled and dimed to death, I decided to go to Courtesy Dodge and have a little shouting match with the used car manager there. And I told him, you fucking sold me a lemon. Want to know what they told me? Well, your mistake was taking it to Berger. Because Berger's service department sucks. And you should be taking it to Cool Chevrolet up on Plainfield. They'll treat you better over there. Lesson learned. And you know what happened? So the next time, anyway, winter came. Thankfully, I had no problems with the vehicle, but now I guess I was now selling plasma just to pay my bills. So this is what happened. Heater broke. The blower to the heater broke, and I took my car into Cool Chevrolet. Cool called up and said, well, we noticed that you got a hole in your windshield, and we can't fix it, and it was leaking all over the blower. So we're talking $800 here. And I'm like, fuck me, now I got more bills. But this is what happened. Cool told me, call your insurance company since you got full coverage, and they'll pay you. I called up the insurance company. They cut me a check for $800. We got the ball rolling. I only had to pay a deductible, like $200. And they did all this work for me. Had I taken it to Berger, they would have nickel and dimed me to death. And because of this, I never did Berger. I never did business with Berger ever again. They can go suck my dick for all I care. And it's not just Berger. It's like all the car dealerships on 28th Street, that section of town, are not your friend. You know, of course, you got all the Fox dealerships that are owned by the DeVos family. I really don't know what to say about Todd Wenzel or Harvey. But, of course, I did do business, however, with Dan Pfeiffer. And Dan Pfeiffer, his story, so Dan Pfeiffer died. And he sold, so his estate sold his dealership to a family out of Detroit called the LaFontaines. They wanted to expand to Grand Rapids. They also purchased another Keller Ford over on Alpine, I think it is. And LaFontaine's reputation sucks too, because at one of their dealerships in Detroit, they had their license taken away because they were caught selling used cars as new. And I'm like, oh, fuck. So that's another dealership that, I actually purchased my last two cars from, here's the thing. I purchased my last two cars not from the traditional 28th Street locally owned dealerships. My last car was purchased at Baker, at one of the Baker dealerships. And the car before that I purchased from CarMax. There we go. And they were good people to deal with. They were professional. And, they gave me deals to get my car fixed for little to no money. And, it's nice to deal, but yeah, I'll deal with those people long before I deal with Fox or Berger or LaFontaine. I won't do shit with, and of course, courtesy. Let's talk about courtesy because of what they did to me. They're all assholes, folks. And it doesn't shock me that they give money to the Republicans. And because of that, they can go fuck themselves for all I care. So, if you are in the market for a brand new car, avoid 28th Street at all costs. Don't buy from Fox. Don't buy from LaFontaine. Don't buy from Berger or even Courtesy. Go to Baker. Yeah, Baker's a big, they actually gave me a hell of a lot more money for my trade-in than I was expected. I was only expecting like $6,000. I got $8,000 because they're aggressive. They want your car. Yeah, and I had to drive, way out into the country for them. They, and it's true. Out-of-market car dealerships tend to be a lot more aggressive. And that's where you want to buy your cars, folks. Don't buy your fucking car at Fox or LaFontaine especially. Or, the other guys. Because guess where that extra money is going to go? To Terry DeBoer and all the Republicans. Fuck Terry DeBoer. She was a very cunty weather girl anyway. Oh, man. But anyway, that's all I have to say. I really hope that something will happen between Mike Duggan and the Democrats. I do kind of hope he drops out, but I don't know. Duggan would be smart to drop out and try to create, diversity with one party. And that's what we need. We need to show Donald Trump that he is a fuck up. And he's fucking up this country with high gas prices. And, it's like that's what the Republicans like. They like to take anything away from you that you've worked hard for. And they do it because they don't care about you or me. And that's all I have to say about that, folks. It's time for Trump to go bye-bye. And I remembered the Bible verse, now that I'm in my vehicle. It is Psalm 109, verse 8. Let his days be few, and let another take his office. Amen to that. Good day and good luck. Stay dry, everyone. We're supposed to have a nice week. I'll talk to you later.